Welcome back, everyone, to the Risk Intel podcast, powered by SRA Watchtower, where we share risk intelligence with experts from across the banking industry. I'm your host, Ed Vincent, CEO at SRA Watchtower. Hello, welcome to today's episode of the Risk Intel podcast. I am really excited to have with me today Jeff Fink, the co-founder and CEO of Lumio Insights. Jeff, thanks very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Jeff, before we jump into the kind of substance, if you will, the content of the day, where we're going to talk about data architecture, and we'll then continue on in some subsequent episodes around this theme of data. Perhaps you could start by sharing a little bit of your background and how you got into this space, right? You've spent quite a bit of time really living inside the data arena for community banks and credit unions and financial institutions. So perhaps just give us a little bit about that journey and then what brought you to form Lumio Insights.
Sure, happy to. So yeah, I've been working with data, whether it's data warehousing, data analytics, business intelligence, a lot of different buzzwords, but all with the central theme of data for 30 plus years now. I actually started out working for KPMG auditing banks, so that was my first interactions with financial institutions, and I'm glad it was. I'm glad it was that way because I really feel like I got to understand how does a bank operate, and how do they serve their customers, and what's important. And so started out there and then went to one of the core processors for financial institutions, Fiserv. Felt like it was kind of right place, right time. I helped one of their first data warehousing products for large institutions called Informant. I joined that team. Eventually managed analytic applications for that team, and really that is where I feel like I really grew up with data and understanding how it could be leveraged by banks and credit unions. And then eventually in '99 I left and started an analytics company called Tangent Analytics. Just thought maybe there's a better way to do things, and had some different ideas. So built that up over time. Tangent was then acquired by Jack Henry, so one of the other core processors, in '05, and then I managed business intelligence solutions for Jack Henry for a few years. But I just have that entrepreneur, really love that concept, love small business. So went off on my own again, and eventually came to start Lumio about 5 years ago. And really, when I think about it, Ed, I think the consistent theme in everything I've done and kind of where I've come from is just using data and thinking about it as a strategic asset of the organization, and how can we get as much return, thinking about kind of the ROI approach of if data is an asset, how can we wring as much ROI out of that data as possible, and use it for things obviously in decision making. And we hear that in a general term all the time, but really how do we understand our customers at a deeper level? How do we improve the efficiency of operations and manage risk, and all those things that every organization is trying to do. And I just believe that data should be the center point or foundation of all of those activities. And obviously I'm not alone. Like, that's a very popular concept now, and that's what we do at Lumio is really, we have a passion for helping institutions leverage their data in more in exciting ways that help them get more return for their data assets.
Thank you, Jeff. You have that's That's great background, and certainly I think highlights your credibility an SME in this area. You know, we were at the Jam FinTop Summit a few weeks ago now, and coming out of that, one of the most prominent theme I'd say, and I've repeated this in multiple conversations since, is that data is the currency of the future, right?
Yeah.
You talk about data being the center point and the foundation for all activities. It's that simple and that complex at the same time, right? And so I think that theme is really pervasive throughout the banking and credit union space at this point in time. So maybe on the heels of that, I'd like to start and talk today a bit about data architecture. There are some other themes, right? Well, in subsequent episodes, we'll talk about data governance and then really about this risk concept that you mentioned there as well. But let's start with the foundation, the building block here around data architecture and what are the challenges, right? It's great. Let's say that, right, an organization buys into this concept that data is a strategic asset, and they want to wring as much ROI out of it as possible. But where do you start? How do you even begin thinking about data architecture?
Yeah. So, what we've seen again over time, 30 plus years thinking about, this and seeing how this, how over 100 institutions at least, use their data and how they think about it. One of the themes that just comes up almost every institution that we talk to is one of their big challenges is just the volume of data, that it's everywhere. And I think we all, would agree that that's just increasing every day. And not just meaning, data within a system, more transactions. Of course, that's going on, but just that it's in other areas or in every area of the business. And so thinking about that it's not just one system or not just the core system for a financial institution, it's across the entire organization, all these disjointed, systems that may or may not talk to each other. Obviously disjointed, so they don't in a lot of cases, and so trying to or thinking about, what do I do with all that, or where do I start? I think that's the fundamental challenge of, there's just so much to think about. And then I think about, and I know it does depend on, the size of institution that we're talking about, but, the institutions that we deal with, they do not have large analytics or AI or data warehousing, whatever you want to call it. They don't have staff, that's 20 some people, doing that. And of course, the larger institutions do, but most that we deal with do not. And so they just don't have those resources that, really understand, design and development and thinking about, analytics, or thinking about a data platform and how to bring all these disparate sources together to create that single source of truth. I think most people would agree that, hey, that's a good idea, but how to do that is easier said than done for sure. And with limited staff to do that, it is difficult to then leverage data, as we just, mentioned. What we do at Lumio, or at least what we believe in, is I guess I call it a hub and spoke approach of being able to think of that. Again, another buzzword about, is it a data warehouse? Are these data marts? There's a lot of different, discussion there, but just think, or at least I just try to, think about it, in a general sense of, we're creating a data hub or this data platform that is the center point, and that's where all this data is going to flow into. But the reason it's flowing into that is, we want to do something with it. So, layering capabilities, either on top of or around, that data hub, whatever visual you have, related to this hub and spoke approach. The hub is the data, and I know when we talk architecture, we can get into more details about what that means. But then the spokes, meaning just sometimes it's use cases about data management, like how do I just efficiently and effectively move data, transform data, and then capabilities around, reporting, analytics, predictive analytics. I know AI will come up several times as it does in, every discussion today when we talk about data. But that's to me just starting with, thinking about the challenges. It really is about, the data and the environment, within an institution where data flows is just increasingly getting more complex, every day. And when I think about, what's coming and thinking about AI services and how they're going to be essentially everywhere and all these different opportunities to leverage these services, they all take data as an input. And that's the key. And if they all, and at least I think about it, it's almost like, it's table stakes now. Like when you talk about AI services, it already assumes that you have this data layer that we're talking about, and that data that you have is complete, it's accurate, and it's organized. And that really is the starting point, and that's what these services expect. And if you don't have that, it's the, garbage in, garbage out, philosophy that you're just not going to be able to take advantage of these services, or they're just not going to be as helpful as they could be. And so, that to me is why, we're doing what we're doing at Lumio, and that is thinking about this, as a holistic approach, again, using the term platform, a data platform. And, we can drill into some of those details. But to me, those are the things I think about with, what banks are challenged with now, and how they're trying to make sense of their data.
So Jeff, let's unpack this architecture piece a little bit, more and drill into that. So, step one, there's a decision at the top of the house that says, we buy into the fact that data is a strategic asset and we want to do something about it, right? Step two, right, we're going to try and figure out what is what, right? You mentioned, right, the volume of data is enormous. It's spread across the business. It's not just in the core system. It's in disjointed systems everywhere. So let's say that, right, we as a financial institution start by taking an inventory. Let's just figure out what we've got before we even think about what we're going to do with it, right? Right. Where does an organization go from there, right? They've now got a picture of all of this data. How do they think about it, getting it into one place? How should they think about, right? You talked about data lakes, data marts. Maybe explain some of that terminology a little bit, and then even this whole concept of ingesting this data from these places into that that hub, that platform that you talked about.
No, great questions. And I think about it, I guess the term I use is modern data platform. And I guess maybe start with, if you break that down or think about that, as components, modern meaning, I think in today's world, I think almost everyone will agree that, a cloud infrastructure, is the place to make this happen. I know it's not been, historically over time here. I think that is one of the great evolutions. So I think, just saying that, we're going to have a cloud native environment to build this data platform is a key, decision. And I know not every institution has made that decision, more and more every day, but just knowing what we now know about the capabilities that the cloud infrastructures bring, that it is so difficult for individual institutions to try to replicate, the scalability, the security, the creating that secure environment, and so much that we could, drill into there as well. But that's what I think of first of, let's create this this cloud environment that obviously is secure, and it's more of a private cloud with a lot of safeguards. But then thinking about, okay, now I've got almost like my blank canvas. I think one of the first things I think about is making sure it's modular. And if you're familiar with kind of the I guess it's been at least 10, 15 years ago, but thinking about these monolithic data warehouse projects of all the things that you just said. Hey, we want to the goals of those projects were exactly what you said. We're gonna leverage data, we're gonna do all these great things, but the concept was one very waterfall like in its development. Going through very discrete steps and not bringing value to the very end is one of the, I think, failure points. So avoiding that, a monolithic structure, so things that are very modular. I like to think of it as modular in components in the architecture, but also in the what is the output, and that's what we do at Lumio. Is we call them insight applications. So thinking of them like these apps, or again, some people might use the term data marts, but thinking about that there's a subject area like deposits and deposit insight, or loans and loan analysis, and then customer. So you got the product side, you've got the customer side, and then usually the financial actual data coming actuals from general ledger with budget forecast, that all the ratios, all the different reporting that we'd want to do on the financial side. So you think about those subject areas, I think is a good place to start, at least when I think modular. And then thinking about that we want to make sure that we put the right components. So again, thinking modern data platform, those components in that architecture, you mentioned them, as well, Ed, a data lake. So in the architecture that we subscribe to, a data lake sits out, I guess I call it sits out front, in this platform, meaning it is the ingestion point. So in that, there's tools and technologies that are involved to ingest data. If you're familiar, extract, transform, load. So the ETL processing, I want to go out and grab data regardless of where it's at, regardless of the system or how I need to get data. It could be direct connects. It can be obviously APIs. Sometimes it's just file extracts coming out of these systems. Doesn't matter. The point about the data lake is to bring that data in quickly with very minimal transformation. And it's almost always file based. So it becomes the archival point of archiving what came out of the sources in more of a raw format. And then some curation happens. We use that term to say, okay, I want to make sure that, even though this is the first step in the process, I want to make sure that I'm organizing, what I've received, and so I know what I've received, and I know if I need to go reload, data from a given point or a given snapshot of data that's coming in, from a month ago, I can do that. I know where it is, and I know where, how I've stored it. So that, is one concept of the data lake. The other one is that where we're going with some of these tools and these new AI services and machine learning, and more data science techniques, file storage of data is sometimes preferred. Yes, it still needs to be all those things that we talked about, complete, accurate, and organized.
Right.
But it has minimal transformation to it. It's that's how we want to take it in for some of these services. But then in the step after, just I've got that data lake. Now we also believe in our modern data platform. We believe in dimensional modeling, thinking about the business in those business entities, customers, products, employees, or officers of the bank, and thinking about those dimensions and being able to store data that is more optimized for reporting and analysis. Not just saying, oh yeah, I brought that data out of my core system and here's how it's stored, so I guess that's how I will report on it. That just doesn't cut it anymore. Knowing some of the things that we want to do with it. So a dimensional model approach is I think kind of the center point. And then usually sitting on top, before you think about like, how am I going to present this data to an end user, for a given purpose. We call it a semantic model. It is more of the business, terms and the metadata that describes that data and allows someone who's going to build these reports to understand it in more, like I said, the logical or thinking about business and entities. The semantic model is a way for those users to interact with that data if they're going to be the ones building reports. And then over, thinking of, okay, now I need to get this out to end users. What capabilities are going to be part of this platform of, reporting tools, visualization tools, more sophisticated analytics tools. There's a lot to talk about there, but let's just leave those as a category. To me, that's what makes up, a modern data platform. And then everything is thinking about orchestration of like, how does all that happen? I love the term like automation, like that needs to be an automated process that is validated, that has steps and results of everything that I've set up has run successfully. Data is validated back to those source systems. And now we've got, an environment that's ready, to get some value out of it. But to me, those are the components of an architecture that I think institutions should be thinking about.
That's great, Jeff. I think that's really helpful. And right, you can look at that at the top level or drill down as you did into those areas. But I think that those themes of right, the cloud native environment, right, the modular approach, right, the component based approach, having the right components in place with the data lake out front as the ingestion point where the curation happens, then storing that in a way that is optimized for analysis, and then your semantic model there with the business logic, and then presenting it out to the end user. All that is I think a great framework for people to think about. And then this theme that kind of underpins all of it, which you shared there at the end, of an orchestration concept, that this all needs to be automated and with validations in there, because ultimately you want this process to run right frequently, consistently, right, without fail, and to use some of the words you used early on, in a scalable way. And so by definition, right, that can't be people going in there and pushing buttons along the way, because I think, as you said up front, right, there's a lot of data. The volumes of data are just getting more and more enormous, and so this has to be built in a way that really leans into automation.
Great. No, love it. No, good recap there. And I really do think an institution that has that kind of environment really does have that backbone or that foundation, to really start to do some things that can make a difference, like better serving customers. Like, I think, in my opinion, all of what we just said needs to be tied to that we've got goals in mind, we have a strategy in mind, and those can be the foundational pieces of doing that.
That's probably the place to start, right? If I went back to my starting point where I said the organization has bought into data as a strategic asset, right? That's because they have that goal of better serving their customer in a better way. And so, I was at a conference this week, and it was reminded of the fact that, right, we're doing this for the customers, right? Some of the policymakers in Washington really reminded everyone, and they said, look, if you start there and that's your North Star, right, do what's right for the customer, a lot of this other stuff becomes pretty obvious as to what you should do.
Yeah. No, couldn't agree more. No, I love that as the center point. Yeah.
Jeff, we're gonna bring this part of the conversation on data architecture to a close, but I'll leave with a little teaser for our next conversation. Right, you talked about AI services being predicated on having complete, accurate, and organized data, right? And that really, I think, is the lead into a conversation about data governance. So I look forward to coming back and having a conversation about data governance in our next session. Thanks again for the time today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.